Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening for tonight's episode of St. Ben's at Home. My name is Marcia Malum, and I'm the Director of Alumni Relations and a St. Ben's alumna from the class of 1996. I'd like to begin our time together this evening by sharing our land acknowledgement. Both the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University occupy the original homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. We honor, respect, and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples forcibly removed from this territory, whose connections remain today. St. Benedict's Monastery and St. John's Abbey previously operated boarding schools for our Native children. Now, students, faculty, and staff are working to repair relationships with our Native Nation neighbors. Thank you. Towards the end of this evening's episode, there will be time for questions. So if you have anything you'd like to ask our guest this evening, please click on the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen to submit your question. Please note, you may need to exit out of the full screen view in order to use the Ask a Question button. Tonight's session is being recorded and will be posted on our Alum Learning Consortium's past event recordings page in the next 1 to 2 business days. Now, please welcome our moderator, Heather Piper Olson, Vice President of Institutional Advancement.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for St. Ben's at Home. I'm so glad that you've all taken an hour out of your lives to join us for another wonderful topic and conversation. This evening, I'm delighted to be joined by Director of CSB Campus Ministries, Cindy Gonzalez. Welcome, Cindy.
Thank you, Heather.
How are you this evening?
I'm doing well. Hopeful for what's to come, and joyful. So good. That means good for me.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited to have you with us tonight, and I'm so excited for folks to get to know Cindy, or those who know Cindy to see her again. So let's dive in. Why don't you start? Let's get to know you a little bit. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and born and raised Catholic, and attended Santa Rosa de Lima Church in Maywood, California. And when I entered high school, I knew I wanted to go to college immediately after. I was seeking a very traditional path to go into higher ed. I went to public school my whole life, so I was looking for a smaller liberal arts school that was Catholic. I was looking for that.
You were looking for Catholic.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I came to St. Ben's.
How did you hear about St. Ben's?
At the time, we had some folks that had come to St. Ben's particularly, who had graduated a couple years before I did, and I was, maybe I'm interested. And there was a fly-in weekend, and I came, and I think within minutes I knew St. Ben's was going to be my home.
What time of year was it?
It was early spring.
Okay.
I remember it was early spring. So it was cold, but I loved the visit. I loved visiting classrooms. So when I went back, I applied, and convincing my parents was tricky because I would be an out-of-state student, and I would be my first in the family to be at a college far away, and live there and do the whole thing very traditionally. For a lot of folks, but for my family, it was like, this isn't traditional path. After I came to St. Ben's, I studied Asian studies and Chinese, and I studied abroad in China, and I interned as a Gary Eichten Fellow at Minnesota Public Radio. I left to San Francisco, where I started my career in ed tech. My husband now, we got married, we had a son, and when my son was born, I had a visit with a chaplain at San Francisco Hospital, and it kind of changed my trajectory of what I was looking for.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm ready to continue my education in search of answers for some big questions that I had at the time. Then I didn't know the word, but I was seeking formation for a vocation. I didn't know what it was yet, but I came to the School of Theology, got my master's
Here at St. John's.
At St. John's
Okay.
School of Theology, received my master's, yet still had a lot of questions, So I went to the University of Minnesota right after that to get my second master's in education in the human development school there in the Twin Cities. And during that whole time, I began teaching at Emmaus Institute,
Okay.
which was a pioneering program through the diocese in the St. John School of Theology, in which diaconate candidates seeking formation to enter diaconate in Spanish was being offered, as well as lay ministers in the church who wanted formation, and I started to teach. Yesterday, I finished a course with a group of students in Spanish pastoral ministry. So it's been 5 years that I've been
It's like you're
teaching.
still teaching.
I
to
still
this
am.
day.
I
Okay.
still am. And an alum is the lead of that program of St. Ben's. Her name is Christy Bibbins. She works at the Diocese of St. Cloud. A mentor of mine, Barbara Sutton, is also very involved. And one of our presiding priests, Father Ephraim, I work with him there, and I work with him in campus ministry. So in the midst of all that, I'm back at St. Ben's. I got called back, and I answered the call eagerly to come. And
When Mary Geller told me you were coming back,
Yeah.
she was really so delighted.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be here. It's a privilege to walk with Benny's every single day, and I'm so lucky. I have one of the best jobs, I think, in the world. So.
Well, we're so lucky to have you back too. And I think we were having this conversation kind of I was traveling actually in Hong Kong, visiting a lot of our alums that some folks you know, and then in Tokyo. But we were having the conversation during those travels about how often the stories are of, especially with the sisters, of being tapped on the shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
But we hear that all this sort of, and it used to be something that, when the college was founded, right, they sort of tapped one of the sisters on the shoulder and said, you need to go get your PhD. Someone needs to have a PhD for St. Ben's to be for us to have a college. So she went off and got her PhD, and Coleman tells that story of being sort of tapped on the shoulder, that it was time for her to go get her PhD so she could come back and lead. And Rita Knazel tells that story as well. And so I love the idea of sort of being, we continue to do that with our alums and with folks that,
Definitely.
It's time to come back. And so we're so grateful that you did.
And that's vocation. And I think this role that I'm in now, it's a vocation. So oftentimes it's unknown territory of when people call and like name gifts that I think you have. And oftentimes you take a step back and go, I don't know if I'm seeing what you're seeing. But I think that's the Benedictine spirit of like, I think this is it. I think this is right. And I think the humility of it of like, I don't think so. And then now like, it's almost like putting on a well-worn pair of shoes. It fits. And I'm just so grateful that I listened to the counsel that I listened. Yeah.
Well, since we're sort of getting into that idea of the history, let's talk just a little bit about let's get into a little bit about the history of campus ministry at St. Ben's.
I think St. Ben's campus ministry particularly has such a rich history of sisters who have led this department and formed it to what it is and continues to be in a lot of ways. They pioneered something that is truly just amazing, that uplifts women and their call to various different roles and vocations and forms them to be just the wonderful people that they are and will be in our society. So we've had sisters, we've had lay people in this role. Sister Sharon is someone that I know dearly who was director for a long time. Sister Mary Catherine has been in this role, who I'm in conversation with now. And just other folks have been in this role. So leadership definitely has made an impact and continues to be. Whenever I have a very unique question, I go into the stacks of notes that past directors have left, and there's a lot, right? So I'm just like looking.
Sisters are known for
They're meticulous about keeping
absolutely.
history, right? The archives and everything. Who was in this position? Who did this? What have we done in the past? And it's just so wonderful to be able to trace those steps back, but also the freedom to be like, this is how it's been done. And yet you have the right to change that if you'd like, while holding respecting tradition and our Benedictine calls.
So what does it mean to run a department of campus ministry at St. Ben's?
I think to run a department right now that's steeped in the gospel and that answers the Benedictine call for radical hospitality. There's this poem by Rumi, and it's called The Guest House. I have no idea what might happen on any given day. And I know that might fill some folks with dread because sometimes it's hard stuff, emotional stuff, that grief at its rawest point. Students who are struggling, or an alum who's struggling, or someone who needs support that's immediate. I answer the call, and with joy and gladness and the sacredness to be able to answer that. So it changes every day. It's all welcomed there. Outside of those spiritual needs, I have a group of 20 bennies that work there, and they're a wonderful people and team that run campus ministry with me every single day.
So are we still Catholic here at the College of St. Benedict and in campus ministry?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I think, not everyone who works at campus ministry is Catholic, and that's not a prerequisite to work there. I happen to be Catholic, born and raised, and there's many aspects of our spiritual life here that's very much in that tradition. We have Mass every Sunday at 6:00. And attendance is mighty and happy and joyful. And not everyone that attends Mass is Catholic either. I think there's an interest and curiosity, and I think that's very Benedictine to be in this place at this time in life. But we also have an interfaith component that I'm proud of. We have interfaith prayer space. We have students that seek counsel. And that's what we do, right? Everyone has dignity of who they are just by being a human being. And so, yes, I think we can be, Catholic, and also answer the call of any student, because our students are of all sorts of faith traditions and also none. We have folks that are none and yet still seek and are curious and have questions, and I'm ready to be there for those things too.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Sort of, we hear a lot about the nuns, and I mean the N-O and E-S in our world generally. And we know too that there are more and more nuns that come to the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University. And part of it is there's some different stuff with the application. So some of it's just like not checking a box, so we don't really know. But what does it mean to be Catholic today and to serve a population that may or may not be coming with a Catholic background?
Yeah. So I think that being Catholic today is so fascinating and interesting. And I'm from California, so when I say interesting, I'm like invested.
It's not Minnesota interesting. You're like I am intrigued.
I read. I want to hear. I want to learn. I want to know where people are. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, it's thinking that we're nuns and being diminished in that way, and yet having a profound sense of what sacredness is. Some of the students have just a profound well of goodness, of this is sacred to me, being able to be heard, listening to someone else. And those are Benedictine practices that we use every single day.
First word of the rule, right, is listen.
Yeah, listen. So we learn from the nuns, right? And then also there's seasons for everything. I think that even the idea of being culturally Catholic is ever so present in certain folks, that they understand they were formed, they went through formation, or they come from a lineage of Catholicism and maybe have stepped outside of that for a generation or two. And yet it's still very much ingrained, right? So I think that it's an interesting time to understand that there's a difference with being culturally Catholic, being practicing Catholic, being a nun, and yet fully understanding sacredness and listening and being intrigued by the Benedictine nature of our schools. So there's a lot.
And you've actually just sort of, you work for the diocese too. And if I remember, you did some interesting work actually about exploring with the diocese or with folks. If I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but actually asking the larger question of the community about, folks who maybe had stepped away from the church, right? You did some, am I right about that?
Yeah.
Remember, you did some interviewing or research?
There's this big philosophical question of, if a tree falls and no one was there to hear it fall, did it really fall? That's a good question to inquire about, when Catholics leave the faith. And it's such a big personal decision for someone to decide to leave. And oftentimes they're not heard in terms of why or what caused that. And I want to know, right? I care deeply about why and what makes it such a monumental spiritual experience for someone to discern that, and yet always ending that conversation with, this will forever be a home, and if you decide to come back, I hope you know that those doors are open. And yet there's like coming in and out of those doors. So it's not just open doors on one side, it's both ways. There's seasons for everything in life. And even students that are inquiring about entering for the first time, I want to learn why not just students, but in the past in research when I was at the U of M, why? Yeah.
It's very Benedictine of you. So let me, before I say that as if we all sort of know, but what does it mean to be Benedictine?
Yeah, I think that some of the sisters have said this before, or even in literature, if you meet one Benedictine.
Sister Michaela loves to say it. I'm sorry.
You know one
Benedictine.
And like, that's really wonderful to me because there's so many flavors of how someone practices the spirituality that is the rule of Benedict. And I think, sometimes I've reflected in the past of, well, do I really fit? Or a student is reflecting, do I really fit into this idea? And I think what makes the rule so interesting is that there's practices that we practice in the rules of being hospitable, stability, seeking counsel, respect, and listening to others, right? That we put into practice every single day. So I think spirituality and having that conversation is happening every day here at St. Ben's.
With intentionality.
And not just listening for the sake of listening, but listening or for responding, but as an act of spiritual practice. I'm a practitioner by nature and by formation, so it's very awesome for me to watch Bennies and students put into practice things and then tell them, like, that's a spiritual practice what you're doing right there. So
yeah, I love that idea too of practices. And we've been having that Father John, before he left his role as the abbot, was talking more and more about Benedictine practices as opposed to values, sort of this idea that yes, they exist and we hold them, but it values sometimes is something you hold but don't do. And that idea for us thinking about that as, kind of that. So we've all collectively been talking about them more as Benedictine practices. Mary Geller and I've had that conversation often as well. I think it's such an important thing for us to sort of constantly keep in mind.
Yeah, and I'm formed at St. Ben's as an undergrad, formed at St. John's School of Theology, my master's, and so I think that's just kind of the wheelhouse that I work out of.
Right.
The practices that I put into play every single day in my work and my parenting. I have an 8-year-old son and my marriage to my husband. So it's very much what I do comes out of that formation. There's like almost no separating it. So I think that it's, people often talk about the sense of community that comes with St. Ben's. And one of the things that I love to talk to our campus ministers about is that it's not just entering a community, but you're entrusted to be in community and welcome others in the same way that you were welcomed. So it's an ever-going practice. It's not just some people welcoming me in, but I'm called to do the same thing.
Yeah, it's not that gatekeeping. And that's partly where when we had the conversation around becoming community and we still do, we talk about that. Instead of it's not community, like the idea that community is constantly evolving.
Yes.
That we are constantly evolving as part of it, and that we are all in this together, and that idea too, which is a very Benedictine sort of way of thinking too, that idea of stabilitas, right? Like we are changing but in place and deeply rooted.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
And that
right.
willingness to constantly do that. So you talked a little bit about your campus minister. So let's talk a little bit about, could you just tell us about the programs in campus ministry?
Yeah. So we have 5 ministry teams, but outside of the ministry teams and what we offer, some of the things that we do are we have a grief support group that just started that I'm co-leading with a campus minister who's discerning a vocation in ministry herself. So that's really great to be able to work together and to kind of just be like, hey, here's someone with like raw talent, right? Just like, okay, this is definitely someone who's being called in this way, and naming that and being able to co-lead something with a student is my favorite part of the job. We have that. And we also have some service sites that we visit with our spirituality and social justice team. There's the Dream Centers in St. Cloud. There's something called Community Kitchen at St. Ben's where, we don't like to throw away our excess food at the end of every night. So twice a month, our SSJ team, along with Benny's and Johnny's, goes to the Dream Center. They take a meal. The Dream Center in St. Cloud has programming and homes sometimes for formerly incarcerated adults. So our students go and they share a meal and break a stigma of fear sometimes that folks have about formerly incarcerated folks, and the dignity of listening in to someone else's story. Spirituality and social justice. We have an interfaith team, and one of the students, Grace, she made these beautiful flower arrangements for us this morning.
We've really stepped up our game. Longtime viewers will know it's usually just a plant from one of my colleagues' offices, but this is really quite lovely.
And Grace Dresser is going to be going to the UAE this January on a study abroad opportunity to learn more about interfaith perspectives, and she's on our interfaith team.
It's a really amazing program. And many of you, again, viewers will remember our conversation with Kevin Clancy, our director of global education. So he has been working along with some partners for this particular opportunity. It's all paid, if I remember right. It's
which is
really incredible.
rare, but it's wonderful to have some of our students be able to do that and to experience that, and then come back to St. Ben's, and especially for Grace, who works in our interfaith team, to really like come and teach us about what we're getting right and maybe what we're not, and putting into practice our skills for better use. We have our liturgy team that puts together our mass every Sunday of the academic year at 6:00. I'm there with them. Part of that team is our choir, and the other part is our sacristan and sacristan apprentices. There's multiple. And they learn every aspect of Sacred Heart Chapel, everything from technology to Eucharistic ministry, how to work alongside our sisters who are ever so present in the chapel and walk with us. So our liturgy team is strong and mighty. They put together the liturgical music, our worship aid for Mass. So they're skills that are very valuable for various different things and jobs and such.
I do think people assume that we have Mass and it's the sisters who sort of put on our student Mass, but it is in fact your team that does that work.
It is.
Sister Elaine just supports as needed.
She does. Sister Elaine is there on Sundays, and she's so wonderful. She's my colleague. She's ever so present and cares so deeply. And I trust her, and I think she trusts me too. So there's mutual respect, and she's an expert in so many different ways. So we also have our LMD team, Los Mayordomos de Dios, Spanish-speaking liturgy team that puts together our huge feast day cultural celebrations.
Which we just celebrated last week. This week. We
celebrated Spanish Mass for Dia de los Muertos, and we had our prayer blessing. We put an ofrenda up in the library every year to remember loved ones that have passed away all through the community, including sisters, right? And we hold a prayer blessing where everyone's welcome. We have traditional pan de muerto that our Gretzky Bakery made.
Oh, really?
They did such a good job.
I didn't know. I would have bought myself one. I didn't make any this year, so I would have.
They did such a good job.
Oh, okay.
And
start putting an order in.
And, they have a choir and they sing in Spanish, so the cultural identity component is incredibly important. And And Benedict calls us to that hospitality of, we learn more about who God is, I think, through knowing different faiths and different cultural traditions of how we practice faith. So that's always really great. And then we have our faith communities team. They put on the Feast of St. Benedict every year that we work together with the St. Vincent and the sisters. And they also do Hour of Service. This is the second annual Hour of Service event. And we try to make as many tie blankets during Advent. And they get donated to the St. Joe Food Shelf.
Oh,
So folks come to get a box of food and they also go home with a blanket. So, and they're really nice, and our students really show up, and it's kind of like they work in teams to make.
Yeah, well, it's especially that time of year too. Like they're stressed with
They
finals. There's
are.
a lot going
They
on.
are.
It's a chance to sort of be together in community, and
Yeah. So
a
there's
little bit of therapy in there too.
It
Yeah.
is. So we have a lot of good times. We have 5 ministry teams, great bennies all around, 20 bennies that work there. So
20 bunnies that
Yeah.
were there. It's incredible. Just because I had the chance to chat a little bit, you were talking about sort of the team general and the liturgy team, but I had a chance to hear you talk about actually the first mass that they put on, or the first service that they put on each year. And you guys share just a little bit about orientation and sort of what your team's role is in orientation for all of our incoming students.
So on student move-in day, orientation starts for them after they've moved in. The last thing that parents are invited to is to come to the very tradition based here at St. Ben's, to the prayer blessing that happens, where parents bless their bennies and bennies bless their parents. And that's campus ministry doing that. Prior to that, we have orientation, and we speak about what they're about to witness and see. It's such a sacred moment to be present when a parent is saying goodbye to a student. There's a lot of emotions it's sacredness. It's the best word that I could use to be able to be in the presence of that. And it's filled, right? Every pew it's filled. We put up extra chairs. The students students get to do different things and welcome people in for the first time sometimes into this space. And I stand in the center of the mass of the church actually, and the students get to see me up there and recite the prayer alongside the parents, and it's such a moving experience. And oftentimes, like I cry too, and
I get teary just thinking about it. I've heard you. It's not the first time you've said it, and I'm still teary just thinking about it.
And I think it's one of those occasions at St. Ben's that like everyone makes their way there. And it's sacred, and it's hospitality at its best, and that we're there listening in and helping and helping parents.
These families trust their children,
Their trust.
with us, trust them to us,
Yeah.
and we trust them, these students, and sort of to do that. I think about that. There's so often people will tell the story of sort of the sister who welcomed them at the door and said, like, you're home here. And this is we continue that radical hospitality that you talked about earlier. I think about that really, like, that's the most clear, like that really that you're a part of that. And I love talking to the students about that being sacred.
And I think, they'll see these faces, the team, they still talk about it. Some of them were brand new, so it was the first time that they were doing it, and they were like, whoa. It's almost a sense of, and I get this question, like, should I have been there? Should I have witnessed that? Like, am I worthy to have been in that? It's very private to watch someone say goodbye to someone they've lived with their whole life in that way. It's almost like countercultural, but yet expected, right? In tradition of going off to school and seeking wisdom for themselves. And yet it's like, yeah, we're meant to be there, and recognizing that it's sacred space and that we're called to walk for the next 4 years with the bennies that we just welcomed into their home. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. So how do you get all of this done? You've just shared those 5 areas. Maybe if you want to just talk a little bit about, I think you've shared about the key initiatives. So how do you get all of this done? You're one person. You have a team that helps you. What do the staff do maybe with each of those areas?
So yes, I am the only staff person at St. Ben's Campus Ministry, and I have our students are 20 and mighty and help a lot, and I walk with each of them. So I know them outside of campus ministry too. So I take time to know what they do, who their friends are, what their classes are. I care deeply, so deeply that they're having a good experience here, that I'm writing letters of recommendation and I'm calling people in, like, you have to meet this student. She's so wonderful. And sometimes even I'm recommending them for other jobs too, like if they want to be an RA, and I'm like, okay, let's call Res Life and tell them that you're interested. So I know them well, each one of them. And I am in charge to name their gifts and to walk with them, but never see them as empty vessels, because they teach me stuff every single day, every day. And for that, I'm very, very thankful. Not everyone gets that experience to say that they're learning from them. But also the sisters are ever so present at Sunday Mass. If I need a spiritual help, they're one call away, and I'll walk over to the spirituality center and I'll say, like, Sister Mary Catherine's always like, okay, like, let's talk. And they'll listen to me, or even if it's just like a knowing glance. So I was at Mass for All Saints Day on Friday with the sisters, and Prioress Karen Rose, who was on the segment recently.
Yep, she was.
She was standing in the choir stall singing with the sisters, and I looked over and I smiled and she smiled back. And so it's just even a knowing glance is so encouraging to, like, they know the work that we're doing, and they appreciate it. And they're and my colleagues, they're ever so present. Malik at the MCC, Sydney Robinson at the MCC. I have a very supportive supervisor, Mary Geller, our dean, Jody Terhart. Oh my goodness, she's at Mass with us, or supporting our students so much. I sit on the iLead steering committee because I'm an iLead alum myself.
Right.
So I'm an out-of-state student from St. Ben's originally, so I listen to, like, our out-of-state students that have gone through that experience. So I just, it's radical hospitality all around. I'm a practitioner, so that's just what I do.
That's what you do all the time. So you mentioned the sisters as a part of your support, and you mentioned too that Sister Karen Rose was with us on St. Ben's at Home. And for those who want to watch that, it was the fall of last year's first episode. But they talked about, they're moving, eventually going to be building a new monastery and living and moving to a new monastery, still on campus, or still, adjacent to campus, but here. So tell us a little bit about the ways they continue to be involved, the ways that legacy work between the college and the monastery continues as concerns campus ministry.
Yeah, I think that they're relational. So they have, they still, and some of our alums will know Benedictine friends, right? So that still happens, and our students know them in that way. They're at Mass, they'll come and give announcements. And we had Sister Catherine Denny come and make an announcement at Mass this past Sunday about Vocation Week. And they help me with liturgy questions when they're ever so specific. Sacred Heart Chapel is their space, and they are hospitable to us when we come in every Sunday to host Mass there. Also, Spanish Mass is at Sacred Heart Chapel too on Saturdays a month. So I think that their relationship is the trust that they have in campus ministry and the support that they are, like, readily to help, and yet the great sense of just thankfulness that they trust me in what I'm doing, and are ready to, like, come and be if I invite them to something. They're there supporting Benny's because they care so much. They come from the start of this college, right? Women's education, it matters. So they continue to be champions in that way. And, I'm an alum, so I've had some of them as professors, right? When I was a student here, and I did some retreats with some of them when I was a student here. Actually, the prioress now was Sister Karen Rose before, and I had conversations with her when I was an undergrad. And then now coming back as director, she's our prioress. So,
Right.
and Sister Michaela too. Like, there's just so many, the presence, it's felt, and they care deeply, and they love our students very much.
And they have shared with me too, they feel, I see them sort of lift you, like send you forward, right? Like
They do.
you are the director of campus ministry, and when it comes to ministering our students, you are the leader, and they are there to support, as
They are.
opposed to, kind of lead instead. They never
Exactly.
undermine in that way.
No, they haven't, and they'll send forward things my way, and they'll tell folks, like, you need to talk to Cindy. She's the director of campus ministry. If she needs our support, we'll be there. But there's a sense of trust that I respect them deeply. So yes.
So let's talk about the story from the most recent magazine. For those of you who receive our magazine, if you don't, please let us know. But there was a beautiful story in there about 3 students who you walked with in their individual faith journeys last year. What was like for you as a caring adult in their life? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So last year, part of campus ministry's role is to provide formation opportunities for students seeking to enter the church sacramentally. So whether that be seeking baptism, first communion, reconciliation, confirmation. And last year, 3 Bennies stepped forward that they wanted to receive sacraments. And I answered the call and said yes, that I would do it.
That I would have anything else going on. It's like we've already covered, if you remember. She's got a lot going on.
And in the magazine, you'll know their names. Mom Maddie and Julissa. Walked with them for an entire year in formation. Really got to know them. 2 of them are nursing majors. One is a pre-veterinarian track. Benny, super busy, right? Just very academically driven, caring Bennies. And we made room. We're going to find time. This is what you're being called to do in this moment.
What's the time commitment?
It's a year.
Okay. And how often would you meet with them?
For like 2 to 3 hour sessions twice a month.
Oh, wow. So
it's
it's a big commitment,
It is.
really.
It is a big commitment. And not just that, it's heavy work. It's not a class, so you're not being graded on it, but it's heavy work, and then it's spiritual work. So there's like big questions that you ask yourself. Why now? What are we seeking? So they did it, and I walked with them. And when we finally made it to that sacramental mass, it was so special. Maddie was baptized and fully initiated in the church. Lissa and Alma both were confirmed. It was a Spanish liturgy. Father Ephraim from the Abbey presided at Sacred Heart Chapel. The sisters showed up for this special mass, as well as Malik Stewart. So my colleagues, Mary, Jody, they showed up, right? It's a community that shows up and is present for these very sacred moments that we're allowed in. Their parents were here. People came from very far away to be present for their daughters. And I'm ever so grateful to have had that privilege to be in their presence and watch them. I'll never forget it.
It feels so unique, but it seems like from what I've heard, that there has been continued interest in faith formation. So tell us a little bit about sort of what this year looks like, and what do you attribute to the interest in faith formation?
I think that could be so many different aspects as to why, but we've doubled in size this year.
Oh, wow.
We have some Johnnies in there too, which is so great. And I won't release names because those names get announced at a mass in December, because they're still discerning if this is what they're going to commit to. And you have until the very final mass to say, I don't want to do this, right? COVID hit when some of these folks were at the age to enter formation. So some people did not want to do Zoom, and that's okay.
Right, they've had enough Zoom, like
Yeah.
to do formation, like to do confirmation over Zoom was kind of more a bridge too far for some folks probably.
And then others, it's a new kind of entering into the church. And others are just doing it at their own time, which I respect. It's such a special time to say yes to something like this, to formation as a student, full academic load of credits. So I take that with sacredness of, I'm gonna give you the best experience that I can. But Heather, I think one of my favorite things about teaching in this capacity of formation is I often give this analogy of a snow globe, and people will disagree with me, and that's okay. We all have different opinions, but you could either look through the snow globe as a teacher of formation and kind of watch them journey off, or you're not looking and you're in the snow globe and you're making footprints along with them in the snow, right? In the snow globe. I'm with them in there because it's hard work. And in formation, you learn alongside them, which is hard work, but work that is good. Very, very good. So.
It's lovely, and we can't wait to hear more about their stories and celebrate with them. And I think it's been one of the interesting things in my time is not only seeing students, and they're really, I'll be honest, we haven't seen a lot of students necessarily, go into that work of formation during their time. It's not that it hasn't, it's just been less. And I think there's something interesting about the cohort, maybe the community you've created. And I think there's something about the timing, like you said, this moment of time. But I've also had the pleasure and joy of seeing some colleagues, actually their time here at St. Ben, their work at St. Ben's, their work with their fellow colleagues or the sisters, and our students that's brought them to that point, which is, I think, another one of those sort of unexpected joys of the job.
Yeah.
So,
and we have 2 grad students too at Campus Ministry that are in MDiv programs at the School of Theology, and I do formation with them, ministerial formation, because they work with us. And one of them is Benny, one is not, but is ever so present. And so I get to journey with them as they discern
their
different
work,
vocation ministry calls.
So let's kind of keep talking about that. So students seem to be having an increased interest in liturgy, the planning, having roles in mass that you talked about, cleaning up after. So it's also interesting to note that not everyone in campus ministry is Catholic, but there's still interest in liturgy. So tell us how all of this is unique or special, sort of.
I think that our Benedictine practices, when done well, invite people in, everyone in, and it's a spirit, so it's alive, right? So it's infectious, and people are curious. But yes, I think that we've seen an increase in folks attending mass on any given Sunday. I think this last Sunday we had a lot of Bennies and Johnnies and community members. Parents that are visiting students are always
That's right.
welcome.
It was also family weekend too. So
and they come and get to see how our campus ministers are leaders on campus in this way. This past Sunday we had a Eucharistic ministry training. 5 students showed up and want to serve in that way. I should add that one of those people is my brother, who's a Johnny right now. So we have a big age gap.
Wow.
He's wonderful.
That's so exciting. I didn't know that. That's so fun to have him on campus.
It is. And
maybe not for him. I don't know how it is to have your big sister in the staff. But
he comes to mass on Sundays at 6 o'clock. So there's an interest and a desire to learn and be in community. And it's an hour a week here, right? So Sacred Heart Chapel and all its beauty. And you come and just enjoy the stability knowing that it's there, right? And it's a rhythm. And there's hospitality before and after, and oftentimes afterwards we'll have a social, we'll have pizza, we'll have ice cream. The sisters are there. It's joy, it's a party.
So One, I just want to remind our listeners that they can submit questions. So if you have any questions, we're about to get to that point, but we'll keep going here. So tell us a little bit about how campus ministry and the multicultural student services work together. You mentioned my former colleague, Malik, well, he's still my colleague, but our former IA colleague, many folks know Malik as well. So tell us a little bit about how you work together.
Yeah, so when I was an undergrad here, I worked at the Multicultural Center all 4 years. So, and I was an intercultural lead scholar. And now coming back, you know, the MCC just has a special place in my heart, and all of their programming is something that I encourage all of our students to attend. And we're situated right next geographically, right, in Murray Hall. Campus Ministry is on one side, and the MCC is in the front. And they host us in their event space for different campus ministry.
It's a beautiful new space.
It's a beautiful space, and it allows for community to gather. I also sit on the intercultural lead steering committee with Malik, and that allows me to get to know all of the incoming first year students that are receiving this awesome scholarship that allowed me to attend St. Ben's and formed me in the leader that I think I am. And it also helps me connect with students that are out of state, connect with parents when they're dropping students off for the first time. It offers connection and a bridge, I think. And at its best, that's what colleagues are. We're each other's bridge to better support our students.
So let's talk about the role of women in the church. Women are clearly answering the call to minister in faith communities. On both campuses, the bulk of the students who do the ministry work are Bennies, both at SJU Faith and at CSB Campus Ministry. So what do your student staff, what do you say to your student staff when asked about the role of women in the church?
So clearly, the role of women in the church, all campus ministers, and not by intention, but they're all women. We're all women in that space. All are welcome to apply. And I think that's very much, it says a lot about the current church as a whole, that women are leaders as ecclesial ministers, as educators in Catholic school districts, or diocesan schools in dioceses, right? With ever so dwindling numbers of folks that are entering vocations of priesthood or diaconate, women are taking the call that Pope Francis made to us to answer the call of lay ecclesial leadership seriously in ministry, right? And their role is that they have a seat at the table, and we have a voice, and they're in formation, and these are skills that no one can take away from you. And we're in such a luxury to be with the sisters. They pioneered so much. And we're just following in the trajectory that they have set forward. And some of us will go way farther. Some of the Bennies that I know now will go way farther than I ever will. And that causes me great joy, because that's how it should be.
Like they stand on your shoulders, and that way they can see further and go further, right? That's the point. So what matters about women's spirituality? What's so essential about, this St. Ben's campus ministry work?
I think that, in the past, we'll hear from theologians or saints or ministers that spoke out of a male perspective of faith and spiritual growth and development, that didn't necessarily allow for the questioning of the emotions or the questioning of vocation, and we have questions too, and we deserve to be heard too. So I think that to watch our team of Bennies lead in a way that's hospitable, that listens, that cares deeply, they're brilliant in their academics and yet still decide to be in this role as a leader. This space is theirs, and I'm walking with them as a fellow woman myself, right? It matters. it just really does matter.
So you've talked a little bit about students who are doing some discernment, or even if they haven't named it yet, you're clearly working with them. So what's your role with vocation?
Yeah, so I think one of my favorite things to do with our campus ministers, or even folks that don't work at campus ministry, is talk to them about where they want to go, right? What they want to do. Often it's not ministry, and that's okay, right? So I'll help students with a resume sometimes, or writing a letter of recommendation, calling, inquiring about something for someone, connecting recruiters for further education with students. So just building bridges, I think. That's my job right now, and I love that. So I mentioned Grace is going to the UAE, but 3 campus ministers are actually going. They're
Oh,
selected. So
It's only a group of 10, correct?
yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So
impressive.
3 campus ministers are going: Claire, Jules, and Grace. And I'm so proud of them, and they're brilliant. So I get that. It's good to see that our community also sees it too.
Yeah, it's amazing. So before we get to question on just one more, at least for me, at least for now, I've got more, of course, but how can alums, friends, and supporters help support your work in campus ministry, and kind of as you think about the future of campus ministry?
Yeah, I think that one of the best ways is to, you're always welcome back, right? So like, I think coming back and sitting in on one of those 6 o'clock masses with our students to just kind of get a sense of how community life is there, present. Also, if you have an opportunity for students to connect with you, be ready to answer the call. I think our alum network, thanks so much in part to your team, Heather, our Benny network is ever so present, ready to help and support. In terms of how to best support our department, I think is we need spaces for community to continue, and for me to support our students in the best way that I can. So we just had a Give CSB day, right? And alum showed up for us, which I'm very thankful for. So yeah.
I would encourage too our listeners to also share what you've heard today, share with others in your own parish communities, at your schools. And if you have questions, I also know this too, you often take calls from alums
Yes.
and prospective students and parents
Yeah.
about what role their faith journey can, what that will look like, what opportunities are there for them at St. Ben. So I encourage you to call Cindy. I don't want to make your phone ring up. But
Call.
please do.
Yeah, I take all the calls. I give private tours to people that come and ask. I want to see the chapel. I want to go into the Okay, I'll show you the sacristy, right? Let's go. Let's talk to the sister. I just had a recent one, and it was wonderful, right? To just show them these spaces. They're for all of us, right? So, yeah, call me, email me. I'm available.
It's fantastic. So this is probably time we should check in and see if we've got any questions from the audience.
Yes.
Amy?
Sorry, excuse me. Yes, we do. So our first question comes from Jen, class of 1995. And she asks, how does campus ministry ensure that people from various faiths or no religious background feel welcome in programming or at Mass?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's the Benedictine spirituality that helps us a lot. And hospitality is hospitality. We welcome all. There's no sense of like, what is your faith tradition background? And we have programming these last year and a half has been centered around community building. So coming together to do something together. Oftentimes it's like we had a painting night last year where we painted something special. We have hour of service where students are like actively doing something together. We're writing letters to the Children's Hospital with letters of love on campus. So it's being active and doing something together. I think that's what matters to me the most. It's togetherness, and being in community in that way. So I think that that's the point of being welcoming to all, is that we have opportunities that it's not just mass on Sundays, although that's important for our community. It's more than that. Campus ministry offers so much more than that. Yeah.
And we're a place of education. I think of it as a teaching hospital, except it's a
Exactly.
teaching chapel, right? Like
Yeah.
you have folks who maybe have never been a Eucharistic minister,
Exactly
making
right.
a decision to learn and lead now. And as you said, you've got apprentices. So there's so many of those ways that folks can learn and be in that space and be welcome.
Exactly. And I mean, last spring we had an iftar meal with our interfaith students, and we collaborated with the MCC. So if there's a feast day in different faith traditions, we observe it and we celebrate it, and I'm there with them. So it's great.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, this question comes from Mary, class of 1994. And she's wondering, lots of people have opinions about how to be Catholic. Sometimes we're too Catholic, sometimes we're not Catholic enough. How do you navigate those opinions when working with students?
I think that first and foremost, saying like, I'm in the center of those questions sometimes too. Of there's forever since the start of the church, who's in and who's out, right? And I think that what makes this place so special is that we're called to radical hospitality, and that the doors are always open both ways, right? To come in and to come out, and to come back in and to come back out. So I think that I take it really seriously that there is no competition in campus ministry as to like who is more Catholic or holy or all of that. We're working together and to make this space the best place that it can be and welcoming of all, Benny's and Johnny's. So yeah, we're very intentional. We know people by name. We care. I think that's just the spirit of St. Ben's though. So yeah.
Great. So thank you so much, Cindy, for such a rich and inspiring conversation tonight. I'm touched by the level of care and love that you have for our students and their well-being. Truly, like you just feel that all the time. Every time I'm with you, I am always just, I know you know their hearts and you're working with them. And learning more about the gem that is CSB Campus Ministry office, and it's truly been a treat. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing the work of your campus ministers too. The one thing I will say that I forgot to say and that we should have said too was that we want and need and welcome your prayers as well.
Yes,
from our alums and
absolutely.
community members.
Yes.
Please do
Yeah.
always keep our students in your prayers. So audience, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for being with us tonight. We're delighted that you took an hour out of your evening to spend time bringing St. Ben's into your home. So we have an extra special treat tonight. So before we wrap up, 3 of our CSB student campus ministers, Sarah Barkley, class of 2026, Noel Aguilera, class of 2026, and Ava Blonigan, let's get that right, 2027, prepared a short blessing to close this episode. Sarah and Noel are incredibly talented CSB Campus Ministry choir co-leads, and it's a lovely ending to a lovely conversation. As soon as the blessing ends, Marcia will sign off with our final information and farewell, but thank you.
Lord, you give the great commission, heal the sick and preach the word. Lest the church neglect its mission, and the gospel go unheard. Help us witness to your purpose with renewed integrity, with the Spirit's gifts empower us for the work of ministry.
Thank you again. Thank you again, Cindy and Heather, for your time this evening. Audience, you can share additional questions or comments on tonight's episode through the evaluation form that will be emailed to you from the Alumni Relations Office. This concludes tonight's episode of St. Ben's at Home. Please check out all the past episodes that are available on our website. We'll be back with more episodes this spring. We will share this link in the evaluation that will be coming out to you in the coming days. Thank you for attending, and we all wish you a wonderful evening.